Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Dave. I'm a parent of a daughter in college, and we live in Chicago, Illinois.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a graduate of the University of Georgia, and she is getting her master's degree at North Carolina State University. Good morning, friends. Regular listeners know that my undergraduate degree is from Michigan State University, and be completely transparent with you. Last week, when I came on here on the Monday episode, I wanted to talk about the tragic shooting on the campus, and I paused for 3 minutes, and I just could not get it out of my mouth. But I feel like to be completely silent about it is to ignore the pain of the victims. And I talked to my mom multiple times this week, and at one time she said, Mark, when I was watching that, I was just thinking, that could have been you. And it's just a really painful topic because my own niece, my brother's daughter, were pretty close. She had to run for cover in a shooting at a suburban Denver school, and she was within probably 100 feet of the shooter. And so to this day, it impacts her. She was a track runner, and anytime the gun would go off, it would really be unnerving and trigger her. And to this day, anytime one of these shootings is in the news, it triggers her. And so it's a very difficult subject, and we've got to do something about this. I looked up a little research. From 2001 to 2015, 190 college shootings occurred. And the last 8 years have been worse. I mean, here are just some of the shootings, both K-12 and college, we've seen. Virginia Tech, remember that? 2007? 21-year-old English student went crazy with an automatic weapon and 32 people were killed. Then we have Sandy Hook in 2012, Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, PA, 26 dead. We have Marjorie Stoneman Douglas School in 2018, Parkland, South Florida. We have Columbine, 1999, 13 died. And then this Michigan State shooting is not the only mass shooting on a college campus in the last 120 days or 90 days. In November, in Charlottesville at UVA, 3 students all around the football team were killed down by a gunman. So we've got to get to the point where we love our kids more than we love our guns. It's really as simple as that. And the thing that disturbs me the most is until we put policies in place, this can happen again. But I just wanted to acknowledge the pain of the victims. We just have to do something. We just simply do. Thoughts and prayers is not enough. As powerful as that may be, it's not enough. Okay, friends. One of the reasons I've been so concerned about the stuff the Florida governor has been doing is because it was inevitable it was going to spread, and it has already spread. So the University of Texas has paused its diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, saying that some have strayed. Now, let me say this. I think some diversity policies have gone overboard. I don't think that's an actually incorrect statement. So I do want to acknowledge that. But you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And what's happening in Texas is actually quite serious because it's the chair of the University of Texas Systems Regent Board. The powerful lieutenant governor has named eradication of diversity practices in higher ed a legislative priority. And this is particularly significant because UT system is coming, pause is coming from the governing board. And its decision is proactive. It's being made ahead of any formal restrictions from state policymakers. And this is a really big school district. This is 244,000 students in the school district. Similar efforts are very close to being enacted right now in Arkansas and in Mississippi. So right now, red state governors are enacting, these anachronistic policies, and it's not only in Florida. Okay, enough about that because it's not my favorite topic, but I don't want to put my head in the sand either. All right, Alaska drops its 4-year degree requirements for state jobs. So you could look at this as a positive, meaning great opportunities for people that don't have college degrees, or you could see this as another part of the war on college, the confluence of so many factors, some intentional, some inadvertent. So you could kind of see both sides to it, but it's a reality. Now, it's understandable because this is being spurred by labor shortages. Labor shortages are literally impacting the delivery of essential services. And with these extremely limited labor pools, state agencies are all having to compete for the same employees. So I personally think it makes sense. If I was involved in a decision like that, I absolutely would say, yeah, we can find people. We can train them. It's better than having vacancies. But it does make it harder for the case for college if people see that they can get jobs that in the past required college degrees and no longer do. And I think that's also noteworthy. Okay, friends, and the final update for the week. This is actually a really big week because the Supreme Court is taking up the Biden student loan proposals. You remember 43,000 students are looking at receiving some type of loan forgiveness, either $10,000 or $20,000 if you were a Pell recipient. So in October, a federal judge in Texas put the program on hold. In November, ruling that the program was unlawful. And others have joined in. So 6 Republican-led states filed Biden versus Nebraska, arguing that it was administrative overreach and that it would cause the states to lose tax revenue as a result of the debt being canceled. And the U.S. District Judge, Henry Autry, initially dismissed the case, saying that it lacked legal standing. But the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals later decided that Missouri had legal standing because a loan servicer in the state would lose substantial revenue. So then you also have Department of Education versus Brown, which was filed by Alexander Taylor and Myra Brown, saying that Brown is not eligible for any relief and Taylor is only eligible for $10,000 rather than up to the $20,000 for Pell recipients. They also argued that the administration did not go through the administrative procedures notice and comment procedure, which requires agencies that they're going to have to notify the public of any proposal like this. So the interesting thing about this case is, while if you just look at conservative judges, 6 on the court, you might think that they will automatically rule that Biden overreached, too much high-handedness and too much authority from the executive branch, and you need to go through the legislative branch. But I've been reading some other conservative legal scholars who think that Biden actually might prevail because there's a chance that the judges will rule that there was no standing. In other words, in order to bring a case, you have to make the case that you're harmed. And it may be difficult for the states or the individual to make a case that they truly are harmed. And there's actually been some past ruling from some of the conservatives that have been sympathetic to that. So the truth is, while I'm expecting it to be overturned, I kind of don't know. I really don't. I guess none of us really do. So stay tuned. We'll certainly come back and comment on it once we have a decision.
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
Friends, our question from a listener comes from Cortnie, and she wants to know, why are there so many fees from all of the college boards, products, and services? And Susan and I will answer that question. Listen and enjoy.
Hi, Mark and friends. Thank you for highlighting key issues of higher ed and for giving parents and students practical advice on the college process. I'm a big fan of your podcast. Can you elucidate on the role College Board plays in helping students? On one hand, I know they are a not-for-profit organization which seeks to expand opportunities for students. On the other hand, as a parent, all I see are fees upon fees for SATs, APs, and CLEPs. Please help me and others make sense of College Board in the application process. Many thanks.
Well, friends, I'm thrilled to have Susan back on our question answer segment. Hi, Susan.
Hi, Mark. How you doing?
Good, good, good. And I specifically like to ask Susan in areas that I know she has a lot of experience, which is every area. But there's some areas, Susan, you just have a lot more experience than me on, and one is with the College Board. And so I think Cortnie asked a great question. It's a nonprofit, but yet all I see is fees, fees, fees on top of fees. How do you reconcile these? What are your thoughts, Susan?
Well, Cortnie, you're speaking our minds. This is something that all of us in the profession have struggled with for a really long time, because back in the 1980s, when I started in admissions, College Board was kind of the student-centered service provider to all of us on the college level, on the high school level. It came across as very pro-student and the student's best interest. And a lot of us who've stayed around have seen that shift to a very obvious revenue-driven business. Now, it is an industry. There's no doubt about that. The whole college admissions process has become kind of supported by both internal and external industry people. It's less of mom and pop shops, which is what it was, for a long time. And a lot of this change has been for the good because of the emphasis on equity and pulling back the curtains and looking at best practices and the lack of diversity and inclusion in the process. But a lot of us have played our relationship with College Board both ways. We realize that in a way we can't live with them and we can't live without them because of what they provide. The nickel and diming is egregious, and it's not nickels and dimes. It's hundreds of dollars now that families have to spend, and the challenge of getting fees waived for families who really are under-resourced and can't, facing sending their kids to college. They can't be spending this kind of money on the process. It's been very self-serving. Let me stop talking in generalities. What a lot of families don't realize is that the industry of College Board includes much more than what they're charging families for. The colleges benefit tremendously from doing business with them because of the enrollment planning service, the AP program, the student search service, the National Merit Program, and the College Scholarship Service. So there are a lot of revenue-producing programs of the College Board that are they are tools. They're providing tools to college admissions and enrollment planners to help them do their job. I mean, the university I read applications for now, we read by enrollment planning service geographic territories, and we have a tremendous information from College Board for each geographic territory that we're reading applications from, drilling right down to neighborhood schools. The recent products that College Board has come out with let us look
Talking
at
about like landscape, Susan.
Yeah, that's exactly.
We haven't talked about landscape since it was first released. Why don't you tell our listeners what landscape is?
Well, landscape is it really is the neighborhood by neighborhood data-driven analysis of schools and school systems that allow colleges to not just look at kind of gross suburban versus urban versus rural demographics, because we all know how quickly these neighborhood demographics change. And the value has been in being able to look at an applicant relative to other students and families in that school system and in those neighborhoods. And it's basically to determine hardship. And for example, now when we read an application at my university and we're looking if a student has submitted SAT scores, which is really only maybe about a half of the applicant pool, 60% at a lot of selective universities might be submitting. We're able to look at score averages, score performance in the school area, and AP engagement and performance. So we're not comparing kids in under-resourced schools and families to larger geographic demographics, which would really make them look much weaker. But in their own school system, their own neighborhood demographic, you can see really that they're actually outperforming in some cases, depending on the kid, of course. So it's a lens that's getting a lot of criticism on one hand, because it feels like exposure and like, well, who's more disadvantaged than who? But as a reader, it's a bit of a lens that lets us appreciate students' strengths more in under-resourced school systems and actually in buildings.
I haven't talked to anybody that doesn't find it helpful that's using it.
Oh, really?
Of the people using it. I think the criticism is coming from those not using it. The people using it, they, even when I was on my California trip, I'm not going to mention the school, but one of the 9 schools, people don't know which one it was. One of the admission directors was talking about they were so proud that one day their internet was down, and a question popped up of how's the file reading coming, and the person, I'm not reading another file till we get landscape back up.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. But I think you're saying this in the context. I don't want to make this all about landscape, but you're saying this in the context of there are some good services or useful services. The bigfuture.org website is another one that a lot of students have found helpful. The CLEP program.
Absolutely. And I have mixed feelings, as you know, about the AP program, Mark, because, we worked at a very well-resourced independent school that could afford to design its own independent advanced curriculum that went way beyond AP labels. Yeah. And we were able to drop the AP designation, as many, many high-performing, both independent and public schools have done. Some public schools have moved toward the IB program, or even some to other types of mastery programs. But these are well-resourced schools, and AP continues to be I was going to say a crutch, but it's more of a scaffolding, I would say, for more modestly resourced schools who are not going to go rogue and design an independent curriculum. I think there are many schools that should be ashamed of themselves for using the AP curriculum, because they could do so much better given their resources and the people that they're able to afford to hire. But we could talk about that another time.
Yeah, because I think overall, I like the IB more than the AP, but overall, I think people like the AP. They find that schools tend to, the kid's getting 4s and 5s. A lot of schools see that as an indication of some content mastery. And students who have taken APs report that and there's some studies that show this, that college rigor was easier for them to handle as a result of being exposed to that rigor. My problem is the fees. Yes. So why does it need to be $100 for a test? And why for the CSS profile, another College Board program, why is it $25 and $16 for every additional test? This, Susan, because, these are things, Susan and I worked together for decades. So we talked about these things a lot together. But how low the income has to be to get a waiver is ridiculous.
Yeah, I agree.
Like I don't know how they defend having such a low cutoff for someone to qualify for a waiver, other than the fact that they don't want to walk away from that revenue. And, I've talked about this before on this podcast. I once did a big number David Coleman's salary was 1.3, I mean, he makes $1.3 million a year, and there's several people over there that make over 900,000.
Yeah, and actually Coleman is closer to 2 million now.
Is he? So that's old information. When I did 1.3, that was about 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, I know. And, my relationship with the board started a long time ago with presidents who had actually been college presidents. And, I survived the years of the governor of West Virginia as the president of the college board, who really, I think, steered the ship in an extremely elitist, ironically coming from West Virginia. But Coleman is under fire in a lot of respects. And if his behavior right now with the DeSantis debacle in Florida and the AP African American Studies course is any indication, he's not going to keep his job very long. This was a tremendous leadership faux pas on David Coleman's part to not immediately and aggressively oppose DeSantis's statements about the curriculum of that. And I just listened to your podcast from the other day, Mark, where you summed it up far better than I ever could. But
well, listen, Susan, I did something Linda does a lot. I just Googled something right in the middle of a conversation. And listen, and because this is public knowledge, this is ProPublica.
Yeah.
Reports on nonprofit. David Coleman, $2.562 million. Compensation. President Jeremy Singer, $1,008,000. Stephanie Sanford, Chief of Global Policy, over $1 million. John McGrath, Chief Communications Marketing Officer, $940,000. That's a lot of money. And how's that money being paid? A lot of it is being paid on the backs of.
Yep, I agree.
Of families that especially my biggest beef with them is how low their cutoff is for those waivers.
Yep, I agree. Well, and for an organization that claims equity and access as its brand, it speaks out of both sides of its mouth on so many issues. And
it does.
I've sat on a number of college board advisory committees and commissions, and I have very, very positive feelings about the staff that were in the trenches with us when I chaired the first commission on standardized testing for NACAC and became very much of an insider at both College Board and ACT, and it changed a lot of my kind of bitter generalizations to a much deeper understanding. But since that time, especially as the test optional movement has, and I'm not talking about based on the pandemic, I'm talking about beginning in the 1980s and 90s, where big name colleges started doing the research and coming to the conclusion that these tests were not helping them make better admissions decisions, that they could do that without using a tool that was implicitly biased against the very people that they most wanted to recruit. The backlash and the people who lost their jobs at College Board and the people they were replaced by was very telling. And I think the loss of revenue when the University of California started making it clear, that it was going to lose subject tests and lose SATs altogether and be test blind, not even test flexible, the College Board is really scrambling to make money. And it's got to be able to find other sources of revenue that still somehow complement their mission, because they are technically a mission-driven institution, which is why the trustees like Ronnie Turner and other admissions people that you and I respect tremendously have to not step into that place of being bought by them.
Well, I mean, I'm glad you brought that up, because one thing I will say, and you and I both know this, they do have some fantastic people that work there. Fantastic people. And sometimes they'll hire away really great admissions people.
That's right.
That they have over there. And by the way, the income cutoffs are, they've lined them up to the federal programs, right? So it's, do you qualify for federal national school lunch program and SLP? Are you a ward of the state? Does your family receive public assistance? Do you get the federal TRIO programs? They've aligned them with that. But yeah, there some really, really, really good people there that I know that are there right now, and I would never criticize them. And I know that they're doing their best, but I just, there are places to me where I understand why any listener would feel like they're really constantly in my pocket.
Yes.
FAFSA is free on the waiver form. Why does CSS profile have to cost so much? Because in a lot of ways, they're functioning like a monopoly. Think about it. If you're applying to a school and you need financial aid and they say they require the profile, you're kind of at their mercy to have to pay whatever they say you have to pay.
See, that's why I think the colleges should pay for it. If a college is going to require something, then they ought to be paying for it. It ought to be a budget item for them. That would make them much more careful, I think, about what they required. But especially for some families where they're saying, we want CSS profile information, even if you are chasing merit money. And I understand the FAFSA because they want to make sure that they're not really dealing with a low-income family that, hasn't filed the FAFSA and shouldn't get merit money instead of need-based aid. But I think to pass a lot of these costs on, when I was at our school, I was given a limited number of SAT fee waivers that had no bearing at all on the income composition of our school. Mm-hmm. And you know better than I how many kids at our school were there on half to full scholarship, need-based scholarship. But yet I was given 4 or 5 fee waivers a year. And obviously I needed more than that with 100 seniors, probably 20 of whom qualified for them. And I had to debase myself on an annual basis and grovel in order to get that. But you know what? Public school counselors don't have the time to do that. They're not going after that the way that I could. And, with the common application, I just gave anybody a fee waiver. I just checked the box for anybody I knew was dealing with some financial hardship, whether or not they were on a big need-based scholarship at our independent school or not. I knew, people who were struggling, middle income families for whom the burden is tremendous because they get nothing for free.
Sure.
And I just would do that. I'm so grateful to the colleges that are now not charging an application fee.
Yeah, is that they really are doing a service by doing
I agree. That. You know what? They're benefiting by getting more applications, right? So there's a little bit of a payback. But if they're going to turn down 50 to 80% of the applicants anyway, how dare they charge?
Well, that's the point that Hillary made when she was on. She said, we don't charge and we shouldn't charge. We're, the Colorado College is one of these schools. It's kind of EAED or bust with their 3.1% RD admit rate. And they're like, how can we in good conscience charge people when we're taking 3% in regular admissions? And I appreciate you saying that. There's a couple of places where I really, really have a problem with their charges. Obviously, the CSS profile, just because it's monopoly, although that's not as much as some. But AP exams is a problem to me because that's an expensive one. That's $100.
Well, do you think schools should be shouldering that fee?
I just know they have such limited budgets too, So, you mean the colleges? I mean, everybody.
No, I was thinking high schools because I know there are school districts where they pay for the exams.
Yeah, they're the ones more flush with money, or ones where they're I've seen where they have really, really active parents that go out and do fundraisers and supplement the college costs. Of course, nobody could mandate that. That's going to have to be done on a school by school basis. But I really have a problem with the charge of the AP exam. And the other thing I have a big problem with, I don't think the $50 is that much for an SAT. Of course, the SSAT world is it's triple that.
Wow.
But it is to run something through a Scantron, basically. But here's what I have a problem with. They set it up so that if you don't register about 5 weeks in advance, you're into late fees.
Oh, absolutely.
And then they get you there, you know? Like
Absolutely.
they don't have to have such an early deadline for late fees, and I've seen it where you don't even sometimes have the ability to wait to see what your score is coming back from the previous administration to see if you want to take it again.
That's right.
You're forced to have to sign up ahead of time.
Yeah, they overlap.
Yes, they overlap. You have to. So those are some of the issues that I have a problem. They do a lot of good, but I think they're worthy of the criticism that they receive. Those are my thoughts. Any final thoughts? Anything we haven't covered?
No, the College Board is easy to vilify, and I'll be the first one to admit that they're an easy target. But I think they are their own worst enemy in terms of not being true to their brand. And I was on the Counselor Advisory Committee for Big Future when it started, and that was an enormous honor and privilege for me because of the group of people that were gathered, very, very high-minded people to design and launch that project. And they spared no expense at College Board to do that. And I think I saw when a new president came in, almost kind of as that project was in its final phases, how the lack of sincerity in the brand diminished in favor of, well, what could we actually charge? Now, I don't mind that there's a revenue. Every nonprofit has a revenue issue. And but I think that College Board has like a stranglehold on the profession. And one of the glories of this test optional movement has been the gut punch to College Board and ACT too, but they're a little different type of company.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Cortnie.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Okay, friends, hopefully you enjoyed Kirby MciIlyar last week, and she's talking about how a college student can know what major career is right for them. Really get into the meat and potatoes of the interview here in this part 2 of 3. And Kirby talks about things like how you can know if your values are aligned with your careers, how you can know if a career you're considering is a good match for your ability or your aptitudes, as well as a good match for your interests. And she shares a few different ways that you can test these things before you have a lot of expense and wasted years. I really think this is a fantastic interview, and I hope you enjoyed as much as I do. Listen and enjoy.
I just really emphasize that smaller schools are way more flexible. This will just kind of come up again and again in these examples. You're right. They're more student focused. They're not going to say no. They're much more welcoming, less bureaucracy. So I think we see examples of that time and time again, that there's more flexibility at smaller schools.
Right. So, are there any things that students should be aware of, like some pitfalls that could happen or things not to do? Because we know what to do, but we also need to know what not to do.
What not to do? I know this is confusing. This is hard. And I swear, I feel like I have 2 pools of advice. One is for big state schools, and one is for other schools. I just think you have to be a lot more strategic and careful at the big state schools because you can get stuck. I experienced that as an open option advisor. People who had no intention of being arts and sciences majors got stuck. And, they were trying for years to get into engineering, and they were just struggling. They were not getting the grades. They were repeating classes again and again. I remember a couple of international students from Asia retaking classes 3 years in a row. It was really sad. So I would say the big takeaway here is smaller schools, private schools are more flexible. You can choose your major later, you can duck in, you can duck out, way less complicated. I would say the pitfall is these big state schools. So for example, this is just sort of folklore, but I've heard this story from many people. I'm from Texas, and a trick used to be to get into University of Texas Austin is you would apply to the College of Education. Even these, football jocks, these guys who had no intention of ever being elementary school teachers might declare that major. And that was their way to get into UT in the back door. But they've closed that loophole. I mean, I think colleges are wisening up to a lot of these tricks. So you can get easily pigeonholed and stuck in a major at certain big universities. So like, for example, my son, Reed, was interested in University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. And he's like, I am not going to get into the College of Business. I mean, I'm looking at the stats. I'm not going to get in. But why don't I apply to econ and then I'll later apply to business?
Mm-hmm.
And the more we looked into that, that was a slippery slope. You could really get stuck in econ, and it was really hard to transfer. It's usually called an IUT, intra-university transfer. So switching from one college to another, switching from business to engineering or arts and sciences to engineering. So I would say that's a pitfall, Lisa. Like, just know what you're risking, and just
Right.
ask yourself, could I be happy here in this college I'm accepted to? Could I find peace? Like, am I okay being a communications major instead of a marketing major in the College of Business?
Right. No, absolutely. I think that's so important. And I know when I was looking at colleges for my daughter, like some of the schools, like for instance, University of Wisconsin-Madison, for their communications or journalism major, like you have to apply into it in your, I think maybe the end of your sophomore year, junior year, but there's not like if you have a 3.6 or something, you'll get into it. They have like a certain number of spots. And so a lot of kids like has spent 2 years there, they don't get into it. And if they want to major in that, then they have to transfer. So that's just something to think about, just to look into, like if you kind of do have a direction. But definitely, people think like I can slide in to engineering. I'm going to apply and be like, history major, and then I'm going to go transfer to the engineering school. But that won't work a lot of places.
I know. You have to know what you're dealing with. You have to know the devil is in the details.
Mm-hmm.
You know what classes you have to take, know what grades you need in those specific classes, know what overall GPA you need. I mean, there are a lot of caveats. One of my very good friends, her son had been told at the University of Oklahoma, just retake that accounting class you failed. We will replace your GPA, no problem. And so we did, and that was wrong. It didn't work. He needed to take it at University of Oklahoma. He took it at home over the summer. So he had to transfer to ASU because he desperately and only wanted to be an accounting major. Isn't that funny? He ended up being an accounting major. He knew he wanted to be College of Business or nothing else. So he had to leave friends, leave his social support, and start over as a second semester junior at ASU. It was hard and lonely.
Yeah, no, that can be really hard. And I know, for instance, at the University of Illinois, if you want to go into the business school, and you get in, that's great. If you don't, they're like, if you want to go to business school, you need to go someplace else because it's not going to happen here, and they're very upfront about it, but it's hard. It's just hard for kids to kind of see that.
It is so hard. I mean, and I contrast that. I was a biology major until midway through my junior year in college. And then it took 5 minutes to transfer to psychology.
Mm-hmm,
and I graduated on time.
Accepts all.
Yeah. And at small school, right? It was like a 5-minute ordeal. It was nothing. So I just think kind of know the bureaucracy. If you're looking at a Berkeley, a Michigan, University of Texas, be very careful if you're trying to kind of sneak around and get in the back door. Make sure you're okay with your plan B.
Right. Absolutely. So, what are some other ways that students can assess themselves? We've talked about how they might assess the major, but how can students assess themselves and find out like what's good for me? What fits with me?
Right, right. Okay, that's a good question. What would you guess? Here's a statistic. What percentage of students are working in careers like 5 years after graduation that relate to their major?
40%?
Well, the latest research shows 27%.
Oh my gosh.
I've
Wow.
even heard 20. I know. And so it's interesting. I mean, in a way, that statistic is comforting that there's a lot of flexibility. You can do a lot of things with a lot of different majors. But it also may mean people have majored in the wrong things and have ended up in a career that's unrelated. So I would say that when students are thinking about majors, there is about 6 elements I think of. I've got a pie chart I show students. And a lot can be assessed in high school through Naviance. It's a software a lot of college admissions counselors within high schools have Naviance. But Naviance has a huge section of it a lot of students don't know about, and that's the self-assessment instruments. So, and these are generally free. And you can look at, for example, what are my interests? That is like a 5-minute thing. And it pulls from the Department of Labor interest categories, the 6 giant categories of interests. And that has been studied 60 years. What interests generally correlate with which careers? And so that is called the Career Interest Profiler, and that is on Naviance. You can also find it on your own. Let's say you go to a small private high school that does not have Naviance. You can just find this online through the Department of Labor. You could even say interest inventory, and you can be pulled into it. So another piece is called skills. So interest in skills. Skills are things you can learn. Skills are things like Excel, or doing social media on Canvas. Skills are things that you can learn, certifications, programs, etc. So that can be assessed on Naviance too. They have a section. And also, Lisa, I can give you to put in the show notes some other ways to find out your skills. There are some card sorts that can be done online.
Oh, I love me a card sort. I love card sorts. Tell
Do
me about
you?
these card sorts. I do. I fell in love with them in graduate school. I'm like, I don't know why, but they just seem like they can tell you so much in such a short period of time.
So short. I know, in 5 minutes. What are your favorite skills? What do you love doing? Do you love training people? Do you love creating presentations? Do you love designing Excel worksheets? What skills do you love using? So that is a feature on Naviance, as well as some of these card sorts. Nodell is he's so sweet, a really elderly career counselor who has some card sorts for skills and values. He's got 2, and it's knowdell.com. Nodell.
I'm writing that down, and it will be in the show notes.
Okay.
Yeah, and also I just wanted to add that I know SCORE has also, it's another college software that a lot of schools use. They have a similar assessments, self-assessment section that you can do. So, if your school uses any number of these softwares, you'll probably be able to find it in there. But if not, then, Dr. Google, I'm sure, will match you up with what you need.
We'll match you up. And I'm telling you, most students don't do this. They don't know about these features.
They don't. No.
And it's great. It's free. Your school pays for it. So use it. And again, don't get overwhelmed. I say there's these 6 elements. So interests, skills, values. Values meaning I want a life-work balance, or I want to help others, or I want power, or I want prestige. Those are all called values. So that is an element I tell students to look at. very similar to values is goals, like I want to retire by age 50, or I want to live abroad. Those would be goals. Another interesting element I talk to my students about is just family values.
Mm-hmm.
Like, does your family expect certain majors? I would say a lot of international students, when I was at CU from Asia, the engineering and business were really the only acceptable paths for a lot of these families. Or even like perhaps a child's passion might be fixing cars. I have a good friend whose son started at a 4-year university and hated it and is so happy at a tech school learning how to repair car engines. He loves it. And he may go back to college in the future.
Yeah, he's going to make more than many of us in the mental health profession. I can tell you that much. So,
I agree.
Nothing wrong with that career.
I know. So just knowing what your family background, family values are. And then the final thing that I've really done a deep dive into this year that I love, I think you and I talked about it before, was abilities testing, which is I do it through Highland's ability battery. And what are abilities? Or another word is aptitude. What comes most naturally and effortlessly and quickly to you? And generally that's hardwired by age 16. Whereas skills you can learn and take extra classes, extra certification. Abilities is pretty much in your DNA. You can compensate for abilities with skills, but I love ability testing because it really tells folks what is your natural strengths, how does your brain work, and I wish I'd done it earlier. I think I'd said earlier I was pre-med until junior year, and I was dying in organic chemistry, physics. I mean, I did everything but take organic too. I wasted 3 years, I could have studied abroad. I could have done so much. And if I had done abilities testing, it would have been really obvious that that's just not the way my mind works.
Right. Yeah.
Some of
It's
these
so
science
many
classes.
Yeah, when you can take something like the Highland ability, or I know like we use U Science, which is another one. And I know like that, like I think is integrated with SCORE. And I know my daughter's high school, you could take the U Science for free.
Oh, good.
Which none of the kids would do, but because it takes 45 minutes, but they could. I mean, so it's there for you. But because I think, in my generation, we just learned the hard way, like by like hating things and failing at things. And certainly I did my share of that. I remember for whatever reason, I tested into the highest level of calculus and physics at the University of Chicago. And I got into that class. And trust me, I don't know how that happened because I'm not a numbers person, but like within 1 week, I could not understand anything anyone said. And I had to like get out of there quick.
Right.
Transfer down all the way down to the like almost the remedial level of these classes. So, but, like, I learned the painful way, and on so many things I think we do. But like, if you can learn the easy way and follow that would make your life better.
Absolutely. I mean, not only avoiding bad decisions, but putting yourself in a field of study that is your strength, your passion.
Yeah.
That is just the way you're wired. You'll just be so much more successful, and you won't burn out.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's huge. I see it a lot with my CU students. I have one student who started as engineering, then switched to architecture, which is a slog. So she's now a 5th-year senior. And know what? She just decided, I freaking hate architecture. I really should have been a real estate major. That has been my passion all along, the business side of building. And she hates all the open-ended, loosey-goosey assignments in architecture, like, build your dream city. It doesn't have to be practical. Build this, futuristic building. And she's so realistic and grounded, and she's not a real big picture thinker. She loves things to be very practical.
Wow, that's amazing. So she's already 5th year. So is she going to be able to get her business or real estate degree soon?
Okay, you
and
know
be
what?
able
I'm
to
glad you
graduate?
asked because I love this. And I meant to mention it earlier. You know what? She dove into a student club. So she is still architecture, just holding her nose, getting through it. But she had the courage to reach out to a real estate professor and he let her into classes he shouldn't have. He let her in, he overrode it because she's not in business. He let her into his classes. She has loved it so much. She joined his club, his student club. They have internship fairs, they have field trips, looking at properties. It has been a blast. She has made good friends through it. She's found her people in this real estate
Oh,
club.
that's fantastic. Yeah, and that's something I guess, like that kids could also do is like so many schools have, different organizations for majors. Like go to the meeting, talk to the people, the other kids, see if they are your people or if they're just, interested in things that you're definitely not interested in, then maybe it's not a match. But that's another great
Exactly.
idea.
I know. And I looked it up. CU has over 450 clubs. I mean, that's just crazy. There are just so many opportunities. And I really do think you'll know pretty fast if those are your people or not.
So tell me about some ways that kids can find out about their strengths, their abilities, and what they're good at.
Okay, got it. So we talked earlier about how there's tools out there for skills and interests online, even through your counseling office at school, maybe with Naviance. Abilities are a little bit trickier to test for free. Use Science is relatively new, and it is either free with some colleges or high schools, or it's maybe $30 if you do it on your own. And it does do a great job at looking at like 8 or 10 natural abilities. And abilities are generally pretty stable, starting with age 16. So it's really helpful to know what comes most effortlessly and naturally to you. Because if you operate within that wheelhouse, you're going to just generally be more successful and less prone to burnout and frustration. I am a Highlands consultant, and Highlands has been around for a long time, and it really came from Johnson O'Connor, which has been around really since the early to mid 1900s. And basically, Highlands does what Science does. It looks at things like your spatial visualization, your how you make decisions, how you work with groups, or are you better on your own? How you engage in critical thinking. And what I like about Highlands is it's a little more comprehensive than Science. It is expensive. There's Highlands consultants around the country. It can be anywhere from $300 to $700, I would say, but it's very valuable. You can use it the rest of your life. It should not change much. And what I love about it is you go over a very comprehensive set of reports with a consultant. And for students, one of the most helpful reports is your learning styles. Like, are you a visual learner in terms of charts and graphs and pictures? Or are you more of a word learner? Or are you more of a listening learner? That is one report students love. What I really also like about the Highlands testing is it combines abilities, whereas Science will say, here are careers that usually match with this ability. Highland will say these three abilities together often point towards computer programming or architecture. So I love that combination of abilities. I think it's really helpful to kids and their parents. A lot of times parents sit in on debriefs.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Yeah, because like with Science, like it'll sort of match you, like if whatever your strengths are, but it doesn't like combine them. And I think that's like the secret sauce of people, right? Is the combination of what their strengths are, and how then they can use that. That's how they do their best work or, perform at their highest level. So it'd be super helpful to know what those are. And I love the learning styles information that you talk about, because I think that a lot of times kids don't realize that until, later, even in college, Like
Right.
they don't realize I need to read the textbook. That's how I learn. This professor
Right.
can tell me this all day long and it just doesn't go in. And some people might be like, I need to see that in graphical form,
Right.
and then they can
Right.
tailor their own learning experiences to that. So I think that could be so helpful for kids.
I know. Another helpful thing about that is if you're like a rhythm memory, that's one thing Highlands tests you on is some auditory tests, and U Science does not. It will tell you if you've got strong rhythm memory, and those are often the kiddos who love to learn by pacing or moving. So for example, if they're learning the Krebs cycle, a great way for them to memorize that is stand in different parts of their room. It starts here and then this happens next. So those are more the kinesthetic learners.
Yeah, my older daughter is definitely that. She seemed to study best when she was dancing and singing her material. That's how it got into her brain,
I love that. I love that. All right. All right. So these are some good tools to get a sense of abilities. And it's a fabulous jumping off place to pick a major and pick a career. Not that you can't do something that is not a natural ability, but it certainly will be harder and you will have to compensate by learning additional skills. You can make up ability deficits with acquiring skills.
Right.
And then some schools even offer group assessments. So that's a great way to bring down the price. So you can do it in a small group.
Mm-hmm. Is it administered like paper pencil or is it done online?
I hear you. Right. No, it is all online now, which is super convenient. Students can do it at their, leisure. We really recommend that they do it when they're sharp and focused, distraction free. And I'm trying to remember, I think the whole battery is about 3.5 hours. So I tell students, hey, do this in 20-minute chunks. See if you can get it done, in 3 to 5 sittings, but take breaks. And it's great because they can do it when they're not so busy with school. I get a lot of people interested in this over the summer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, it seems really fascinating.
It is. I love it. It's very interesting. So that is just another tool to help you figure out college majors and career direction.
Fantastic.
Friends, this concludes the second part of what is a 3-part interview. We hope you'll join us next week for the final part. On Thursday's episode, Susan joins me to discuss a Hechinger Report article by Charlotte West. The article is entitled, An Unnoticed Result of the Decline of Men in College. It's harder for women to get in. Esther from Tennessee shared a Speakpipe question, and she wants to know when a student should notify a college that they will not be coming. We'll have the final part of my interview with Ron A. Turner, the Vice Provost of Admissions at WashU. And we'll also have the final part of my College Spotlight with Linda Depker on the University of Redlands. And friends, I close with another quote from a famous Black American as we wrap up February, which has historically been known as Black History Month. And it's from the great Toni Morrison. And it says this: if you want to fly, you have to give up the things that weigh you down. If you want to fly, you have to give up the things that weigh you down. My question for you, friends, is this: what is weighing you down? See you on Thursday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 15. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Linda Depker, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel. And to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joyce Ducker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stylianos Dimitriou. And if you want to have a coaching session with Lisa, Linda, or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Our favorite method is for you to record your own voice at speakpipe.com/YCBK. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcast. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Monday and Thursday.